Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to some more Shadowlands Alpha coverage. We're continuing our tour of Torghast. Funny. A guide that takes you through the different environments that you'll run into in the Endless Dungeon, with the traps, the baddies, and how to handle it all. This information is based on the current alpha, which makes you think, wait, dude, isn't it way too soon for a guide? Well, you're here, aren't you? But don't worry. We're going to be doing a second pass of Torghast before launch, so don't forget to subscribe and check back later. Today we'll visit the Upper Reaches, which is another departure from what you might have first seen from the Torghast previews during BlizzCon. The Upper Reaches are, they're what you would expect to see in the last dungeon of that one RPG that you played. Like the top of the heap with the baddest baddies, the most god-awful traps, where the big bad guy throws mutated kitchen sinks at you, you know what I mean? And it's really no joke. If you're pushing higher floors and happen to land in the upper reaches, good freaking luck, because this tile set is bound to frustrate you. So far in the alpha, there are no gimmicky mechanics in the upper reaches other than that there are more elites here than you'll find on the other cell blocks. This makes higher level floors even tougher because the packs that you fight will include elites who have the unnatural power buff, making them stronger and eventually become immune to crowd control the longer you're engaged in combat. It's up to you, hero, how to handle them, either take on the elite first or the pesky adds alongside them, but expect to use some extra crowd control to keep yourself alive. You'll also run into the very pesky skeleton types of mobs on these floors who explode upon death, afflicting you with the bone shrapnel debuff for a few seconds and it stacks. You'll also find yourself fighting 5 to 10 of them at once before you know it. This makes skeleton packs among the most dangerous kinds of mobs you'll run into in Torghast. Because yeah, they don't only show up here, so get used to it, you're gonna want to kite these things while taking them down. In general, the majority of mobs you'll encounter in the upper reaches are spellcasters, backed up by explosive skeletons, and peppered among them are these strong elites. While in the upper reaches, I suggest putting some focus on showing up any weaknesses your class has when it comes to kiting, crowd control, and strong single target burst against elites. Since a good chunk of the damage you take here will be magic in nature, not including the skeleton explosions which are physical, certain anima powers like the Crown of Obstinance and Bottled Enigma will help control your encounters with casters greatly. The use of ravenous anima cells to turn mobs into anima powers are only so effective. I suggest not even buying ravenous cells while in this cell block and save your phantasma for other items. Alright, so let's meet the family. The grunts of the upper reaches include the Moss-worn Darkcasters, Acolytes, and Soul Weavers, all spellcasters. They cast Necrotic Bolt to deal some direct shadow damage, and a Necrotic Beam, a channeled Mind Flay-like ability that deals damage and slows you down. The slow can be a nuisance, but by themselves, these guys are bums, they're jokes among their peers. But often you'll fight them in small packs, and they're usually accompanied by skeletons you'll be trying to avoid. In general, you want to make good use of line-of-sight tactics, tapping casters and luring them around a corner. But certain floors of the upper reaches have a lot of open space, so you'll just need to be careful. Moss-worn Endbringers have a bit more punch, but they aren't as high of a priority as the other tough casters. They do have a Shadow Bolt volley on top of their Necrotic Bolt, so watch out, especially if they're grouped with others. Moss-worn Ritualists are a step up from the norm. They patrol around, and they periodically spawn skeletal remains while in combat. They cast Necrotic Bolts, as well as a Shadow Crash at short range, which doesn't do damage, but it does knock you back. This is important because you'll probably get knocked back into more mobs, or a trap, or something else inconvenient, so consider these to be a higher priority target, especially if you're a melee class. Moss-worn Disciples cast Soul Bolt, which is like Necrotic Bolt, but it's a soul bolt. They also cast Cripple to lower your throughput, so these can be pretty nasty mobs while keeping a low profile. But Moss-worn Soulbinders are worse. They do what the Disciples do, but on top of that, they also use a spell called Dark Binding, a cast followed by a channel that deals damage and slows you down. Consider these as high priority casters due to the debuffs, as it's going to prevent you from easily running away from awful things. Meanwhile, lumbering bones are melee guys, and they're the big brothers of these skeletal remains. They're also faster, so you'll need to use abilities to kite these around if you need to. Left alone, they periodically cast bone armor to reduce damage done to them, but you don't need to go as far as focusing them down. In fact, if you are a melee class, just don't focus them at all. That way you can space out bone shrapnel explosions further from each other to make bone shrapnel fall off, and then you'll take less damage. Sometimes a few mobs from other cell blocks will show up on this floor too, like elementals, prisoners trying to break out, and in this case, more freaking guards. Mossworn guards are no pushover, and they're found on almost all of the cell blocks, so get used to these guys. They cast Accursed Strength, which increases their damage by quite a bit, and use Massive Strike, a very hard-hitting physical attack that deals damage in a cone and can nearly one-shot you at higher floors. These you just want to sidestep really quick and then take them down. The Animimic is easy to spot because you might see an anima power just kinda sitting there, waiting to be taken. This mob uses Torturous Leer. It's a cast followed by a channel that deals high damage, so just interrupt the cast or the channel and then take them out. Now though, let's get to the elites, who are most likely to murder your face while you're trying to take care of all the other things that are wearing you down. As a reminder, at higher floors they have a stacking buff called Unnatural Power, which makes them stronger and faster over time and eventually immune to crowd control. The Rune-Carved Colossus is a slow-moving mob that casts Ravage, a slow cast followed by a melee attack that deals very heavy physical damage, and it applies a dot. Fortunately, you can avoid it easily by getting out of melee before the cast goes off, and so at first he's easy to kite, or slow, or interrupt. Once it becomes immune to crowd control though, watch out. He also casts Terrifying Roar, which of course can be interrupted. At least for a while. The Lord of Torment is arguably the least painful of the elites that you'll run into in the upper reaches. It casts Shadowbolt Volley and Eternal Torment, a channeled spell which ironically lasts for only 6 seconds. It deals damage, and it drains a pitiful amount of your resources, because in my case as a paladin, it drained mana, which is, it's like, oh no, right? But this is more harmful to those who don't use mana as their second resource, so be careful or just kick the channel. Death Speakers also aren't super dangerous, as they also cast a Shadowbolt Volley, but they also cast Bind the Fallen, which spawns skeletons, which do other things to you, so it's arguably more important to interrupt or stun this ability. Tower Sentinels are a mob that you'll regularly see throughout the cell blocks. They have a hard-hitting melee attack, they cast Slam for extra damage, but their most powerful ability is their Oppressive Aura, which has a whopping 150-yard range, and while you're in it, it decreases your haste and movement speed significantly, and it stacks. Having one or more of these up affects your performance throughout most of the floor, and it's even worse if you're forced to fight them together. While in the upper reaches you have a little bit more space to move, so it would be a good idea to beeline your way to these elites and remove all the oppressive auras from the floor before engaging other elites. It's also important to note that on some floors, Tower Sentinels hang out in areas that you just can't reach, making it even more annoying to move about. With the current setup of Torghast, you're able to choose one of 2 cell blocks available throughout the week. As it stands right now, I would probably try to avoid the upper reaches because it's just harder. Without gear or very good anima power synergy, a prolonged fight with an elite will make them nearly unkillable and impossible to kite around. But we'll just have to see how things develop in the coming months. I mean, any number of features could be added to compel us to farm the upper reaches or make the experience a bit more interesting or enjoyable. For now though, that is going to be it for today's tour. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, please hit that like button and subscribe for more Shadowlands guides and all things Warcraft. We'll see you later. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.